Welcome to True Print for Life. I'm your host, Christina Vera. Welcome back for another episode of True Print for Life. I am so excited to be able to have this time with you today. Today I will be filming by myself. Maylin will be joining me a little bit later today. But even in preparation for today's episode, it really got me thinking about, times when you have something scheduled or planned a certain way and things don't work out exactly how you envision. It's one of those moments where you ask yourself, like, okay, like, does that mean everything just derails or you pause? Or do you take this as an opportunity to pivot and think about ways that you can kind of put yourself out there a little more, even if it's a little bit uncomfortable? And so today was definitely one of those moments, but certainly it gave me an opportunity to say, wait a minute, we've gotten some questions submitted to True Print for Life. And I thought today would be a great opportunity to answer some of those questions. Obviously, from my perspective, and anything that we ever share on True Print is truly from our perspective. And certainly, it's not meant to override any professional medical advice, or certainly, it may not apply to you specifically. But I always say, take what makes sense for you. And even if it doesn't work out for you, that's okay. We just like to share kind of what works for us and bringing in experts that provide tips on what's worked for them, in hopes that something would resonate, and certainly be able to leave you better than how we found you when you first tuned in to this episode. So today I have the opportunity to just kind of read off some questions we've gotten. Some of these questions actually were really funny, and then some were a little more serious, which certainly we're always honored when you think to ask us and wanting our advice. And so one of the first questions that I got was, how do you know if you've outgrown a friendship or a relationship? And I thought that was a really profound question because we've had some previous episodes where we've talked about the power of relationships and friendships, and really getting to a space of not necessarily quantifying relationships based on, how many friends you have, or certainly how things may look on social media. And so being able to take the time to really pause and reflect and ask yourself, like, what season in my life am I in? And who are those that I have allowed access to me? And are they helping me in this season, or are they contributing to the old way, or things that you're trying to navigate away from? And so this is an interesting question because I also had a similar conversation with someone that I know personally, who I go to see every couple of weeks for some beauty services. And she was basically sharing with me, like this sudden, like, weird feeling around some of the people that she had been friends with for a long time. And, she just recently, got engaged, and just feeling like, wanting her life to look and feel a little bit different, but obviously feeling a sense of loyalty to people that she has been with for an extended period of time. And what I said to her, and what I'll share with the person who submitted this question, is, every season of our life is different. And, in reflection of my own personal life, there has been different versions of Christina. And I'm very, very blessed for the growth of those seasons, because there were periods of my life where I know I wasn't who I believe God called me to be. I was kind of off and living day by day, and not really thinking about how that would impact others, how that would impact myself. And certainly I think a big part of that was just me being lost and trying to figure out who I was, and, what kind of person I wanted to become. And, growing up, I felt like I grew up really early. Like, I feel like as the oldest sibling, I constantly found myself like having to take care of other people very quickly, and not always feeling like I had the time just to be still enough to say, like, okay, who am I? What do I like? What don't I like? What triggers me? And certainly I found myself in a lot of social circles that I necessarily wasn't like processing or screening the nature of those relationships. I just found myself like wanting to, like, have fun, or wanting myself just to kind of be in a different space so I didn't really have to deal with how I was feeling or deal with what I was kind of, dealing with in my day to day life. And it got to a point where I started to really recognize like that wasn't the life I wanted to live. Like I didn't want to wake up every day and not really like know what was going to happen. And even though we can't really control what happens in our day, I do believe you can put your best foot forward to try to make some changes or make some intention that could make your day or your week have a different outcome. And so I want to say it was probably like around my mid to late 20s when I really started thinking about like where I was going and what I wanted to do, and finding myself in social settings at dinners or at parties or even on vacations, like the whole like girls trip. And we see the memes now, like the girls trip made it out of the chat. And I remember sitting on a girls trip with some people that I had worked with actually, and I want to say it was probably like day 2 that we were out there, and I was just so ready to go home. I was just like, this isn't it. Like, this isn't the vibe anymore. I wasn't interested in being in the club to the wee hours. I wasn't interested in, just the whole entire atmosphere was not, I just woke up one day and I said, yeah, I'm done with this. And so it's hard. It's hard to start to come to those realizations because certainly if you find yourself to be a loyal person, you kind of feel bad in terms of, having to distance yourself from folks. And I say, all that because I've experienced it. I've lost a lot of, and I wouldn't say lost. I think it's just time and space. You become distant from people. And I think for me, it was hard to really accept that for the longest because, like I said, I never wanted to feel like people thought that like I was turning my back on them. But when you get to a point in your life and you start to become more and more clear about who you are, what you want out of life, and things that might derail or trigger you or deter you from getting there, it becomes a point where you have to say to yourself, like, it's either you or them. It's either you or this lifestyle. It's either you or this habit. And, to be able to put yourself first is you would think it's such an easy thing. And I think for some people it is, which I've always admired people who are like quick to be like, no, I have a boundary, or quick to say like, no, that doesn't work for me. Because I wasn't always like that. I'm definitely a lot more like that now than I was, even 10 years ago. I would constantly think about, oh, how, like, what is this person's perception going to be? Or is this person going to be upset with me? Or, are they going to feel like I'm acting brand new or I'm acting different? And finally, I just got to a point in saying to myself, if somebody really loves you, if somebody really wants the best for you, if they feel like they need that separation or that time away to, even if it's just for a period of time, it's not a permanent decision. If they can't understand that you're like in this growth journey and this is what you just feel like you need to do, then those are not people who really love you. Those are not people who really want to see you win. And so I had a lot of negative separations from friendships and even relationships. I have been married for the past 10 years, but, prior to that, he and I dated different people and eventually decided to get back together. But certainly even in past relationships, when I decided I would, like this wasn't it. This wasn't where I wanted to be for the rest of my life. And, and I also didn't like the version of the person that I was in some of these relationships. And so I think it's completely okay to say, this was a season and this was definitely, I learned a lot. I'm sure you've learned a lot, and hopefully you were able to grow. But there's nothing wrong with outgrowing friendships or relationships. I've gotten even so much so now that I don't mind going out to dinner by myself. Like, I think there's power in just being able to even be alone. So it's not that you leave a bunch of friendships or relationships and then go out and recruit a bunch of more people. Like, your people will come in time. And I think that's, as you get older, at least for me, I find that it is harder to find meaningful relationships as you become more intentional about what you want and what triggers you, and, kind of this like maturity about your life. But I've also found that when you press anything or you're super hyper worried about like, oh, what if I don't have, a husband or a wife, or what if I don't, your whoever it is will find you. They'll find their way to you as long as you continue to do the work to be the best version of yourself. I do believe that wholeheartedly. And I think that anything that you have to force, anything that you have to, not to say you can't now be intentional and you're doing certain things to position yourself. That's different. That's, your person is not gonna just fall out of the sky, right? But not necessarily like overwhelming yourself and your thoughts, and being worried that it's never going to happen for you, or you're never going to find your friend group at your more, bigger age, I guess you could say. And so I say, it's okay. It's okay. That's what I told this person that I was having this conversation with a couple of weeks ago. And that's what I'll say to the person that submitted this question. The fact that you're asking the question, how do you know if you've outgrown a friendship, tells me you already know you've outgrown a friendship, because that's not typically something that you just would be thinking of. So if you're feeling a certain type of way, it's no ill will. It doesn't have to be like this dramatic separation. But over time, you will find that, you'll answer the calls less. You'll, go to the parties less. And that's completely okay. And so give yourself some grace, spend some time with what you are feeling and why you're feeling the way that you are. Because I think if it becomes an opportunity where you want to have a conversation about it, you want to be able to spend some time thinking about what you would want to say in that moment. But I don't believe it needs to be this drawn out process. I think over time, behaviors, because people who are really about you, and really want to continue to build a fruitful relationship with you, they will make you a priority. If you are finding that you're constantly the one, like I knew real easily, like how I could test certain friendships that I was on the fence about when I stopped reaching out to them. When I stopped reaching out to them to say, hey, let's go, wine tasting, or let's go, shopping, or like once I stopped doing that, I stopped hearing from them. And so it made it very clear for me when I stopped putting in all this effort, or stopped, constantly paying for things, like just little mannerisms that I had, just like in who I am. Once I stopped doing those things, and the text messages and the calls and the invitations became less and less, to the point it just became obsolete. And so, so one of those things that I learned pretty quickly, like the relationships I was really stressing over were not relationships that were really even chasing me. I had put more energy and thought into those relationships than they had. And so, sometimes that's also a hard thing to come to terms with. Like maybe you don't even know that you've outgrown a friendship until you pull back and then you realize like, dang, they didn't even call me on my birthday, or, they didn't even, or you see on social media when they've been out or they've done something and you weren't on the invitation list. And I will add that, if you find yourself in that season right now, like I found myself in that season a little while back where I seen some people that I had always considered pretty good friends, having different meetups, and I was looking at my phone to see if I had missed some kind of invitation or text message, which I hadn't. I came to the point, I also said, you know what, Christina, let's be honest. Like, you've been real busy. You've been real busy for a period of time. You've been working really hard on building businesses. You have children. You have a husband. You have a lot of things that are, in fact, priority to you. And so sometimes people also can give up on inviting you to things, or give up on trying to include you in things if you have not made that relationship a priority. So it also goes two ways. It can't just be, where you feel like, okay, I'm done, I'm moving on. If you feel like people have moved on from you, I know that can also be a hard feeling, because like I said, when I saw what I saw, I'm not going to lie, I started to feel some type of way. And I remember, talking to my husband about it. And I was just like, man, I don't really have like like, any friends, or I don't have any of these social groups. And he was just like, but you don't even want to go nowhere. Like, are you really about to go out on a Friday night and it's snowing outside? And then I, of course, I'm like, that's not the point. He's like, no, but that definitely is the point. Like, what are you really upset about? And he was right. He was so right. But I think that doesn't take away from those periods of time where you feel like I do want to just go out and kick it, or I do want to just be able to have like an adult moment. And I think that's okay. So just carving out the time to say, listen, I would like to make like a social outing a priority, even if it's like once a quarter, right? Like, let's be honest, don't invite me. Like, I'm not one to go out. I'm really like a homebody for the most part. But if it is important for me, which I have a friend of mine who, what I love about her, like once or twice a year, she will like put together like this girls like brunch, and she hosts it. She plans it. She invites me. I pull up with like a dessert of some sort, and it's literally like the one outing. It's usually in the summer. And there's probably like 6 or 7 people that pull up, and it fills me in such a way that I'm like, man, I'm so glad that you think to do this, and that you think to include me in this. And it's just enough. And so, being okay with outgrowing relationships or friendships, it's a part of life, and certainly something that it can be challenging at times to fully understand. It's funny, it makes me think of a story, which she might kill me, but I'm going to share it anyway. If you don't know, I have 3 children, and I have my oldest child is actually 21. She just graduated from college last month, and now she's kind of like in her career field, which is super crazy, by the way, when you have children and you see them, in different variations and stages of their life, and to get them to like this adult stage where, she and I grew up together because I had her as a teenager, and now to see her as a full-fledged adult, graduated from The Ohio State University, and just out here really like becoming her own person. It's the craziest experience. But nevertheless, there was a period of time where she was really struggling with, like finding her people, finding a relationship. And she kept seeing all these like couples on social media. And in my house, Valentine's Day has always been about the kids. Like, it's not really something my husband and I have ever really celebrated for he and I. Like, we probably did like many moons ago. But then it became a thing where I was like, one year I was just like, you know what, we should just do something with the kids. I think what it was is we didn't have a babysitter. And I was just like, you know what, let's just make the best of it. And it actually ended up being like a really fun, like tradition that came about. And like, I get them gifts, and we decorate the table, and we have a nice dinner together. And it became this thing where it's like, now the kids know, like, okay, Valentine's Day is like a big deal in our house. But it's because it's just, me wanting to show them that love can come from more than one place than just like a relationship. And so I remember a year, my oldest was just like, still kind of feeling some type of way. And I asked her, I said, what's wrong? And she's just like, I just don't know, like, if I'm going to ever find, like, my person. Like, I don't know what's wrong with me. Like, I don't have a boyfriend, and this, and this. And, I keep going to all these places. And I said, well, that's your problem right there. I said, what I know about you, you're not going to find your person in a nightclub. You're not going to find your person at some house party, because you don't even like going to those places. I said, your person is going to be at home right now having the same conversation with his mom about why he can't find his person. I said, so you need to stop thinking like all these places you see on social media is where you're going to find your person. If he is really your person, he's not going to be in the places you're going with your friends. Because like I said, you don't even like going to those places. And she used to kind of like shrug her head and kind of entertain me for the moment, but then she would continue to like try to go out and do all the things college kids do. And then now she's actually in a what I believe is a thriving relationship. And it ended up being some guy that she's known for quite a while that like, would be a part of these friend groups that would go out. And, it's so funny because when I first met him, I just was like, he told me, he's like, well, I've known your daughter for quite a while, but, she basically would not go out with me. And I said, so I found it so funny that the person she had been looking for all through undergrad was a person she had already knew and just completely overlooked. And, and he is so much like her. Like, he is not really big on going out. He's very into his academics, very focused, very driven, very, like, there's so many elements of him that even reminds me of her dad, which is so crazy. Because I'll hear like their interactions, or the other day when he stopped over, it was snowing really bad. And I saw him out the window, and he was like lifting her windshield wipers off of her car so that they wouldn't get frozen. And I looked at that and I was like, that's such a thing her dad would have done, So just to see her like in this space now of finding like her person, I'm really happy for her, and I think that that's just a testament of like, what's for you is for you. And you don't have to force it. You don't have to push it. You don't even really have to chase it. If it's for you, it's for you. And so, yeah, so that's kind of my take on, outgrowing relationships or friendships. And so I hope that was helpful to you. That has just been what has been helpful to me. Next question we have here, there's a couple of different ones. One is somebody asked me what my morning routine is. I'm going to be honest with you. My morning routine is not anything special. I'm really I'm still just very much struggling with a morning routine. I do have a decent evening routine, but like the morning routine is kind of crazy because I've got kids. And so like I get up, I'm trying to like get them situated and out the house. And then it's like, trying to get, myself together to get ready to go to the office or get on a meeting or a Zoom call. So I'm still working on my morning routine. So if you have a good one, please share. And like the whole getting up early, I aspire to be her one day. Like I want to get up, like what my picture perfect morning routine would be. Maybe I could share that, and maybe that'll I can put it into the world and it'll come to life. But I would love the ability to get up early enough to be able to have some quiet time to either pray or read, or like just get my notes for the day like on paper, and to be able to maybe even do a little bit of like a 30-minute something, whether it's like a walk on the treadmill or just some kind of self-care. And then like by the time the kids are getting up, like I'm already like dressed and ready to go. So ideally that's what I would love my morning routine to look like. But right now I am nowhere near that. So I'll have to circle back to you on the morning routine question. Next question is, what does this say? Parent stroke. So you have a child and you are really struggling right now with parenting. You feel like the new age generation is challenging and you just feel like you're failing. Ooh. Well, parenting right now is very challenging. And so, as you know, I talk a lot about my kids on here, and, some days are better than others. And right now I'm also struggling with one of my kiddos, and, it's just gotten to the point where it's just like everything I say, it's just like she almost wants to do the opposite. And, it's become really, really challenging. And what's hard is because I feel like I've really worked hard to be like I don't want to say a new age parent, but like I'm aware, like I work with young people, I serve young people. And so I feel like I'm not super detached from the day to day. But what is very different is, this new generation has grown up with so much technology. And so they're seeing different parts of the world and situations and topics play out in front of their eyes every single day from such a young age. And so there's so much that they know that they have not really been able to mentally process. And as parents, like for many of us, we're just trying to do the best that we can. And some days I feel like, I did better than other days. And then there's some days that, I'm really like, what did I do wrong here? How can I make things different? And so I think a big part of what I would offer you is trying to find like other parent groups. That's something that we are looking to possibly start at Femergy, because, as you know, Maylin and I both run a nonprofit organization that serves middle and high school age girls. And we are finding that many of their parents are also reaching out to us asking for advice and support. So we are looking at possibly launching a parents group in the coming months, and trying to find like an outside facilitator, like a family therapist or somebody that can kind of come and help us unpack, parenting, because it's not easy. There's not one set solution that fits all children. Every situation is very unique, and your child. You know what or hopefully your child. Sometimes I think I know my children, and then they do something, and I'm like, no, maybe I don't know my child as well as I thought I did, and that's okay. Like I think that as parents, just like anything else, like every day you're trying to do better. You're trying to figure it out. And if not, you should be, because I think that parenting is something like any other position or title you hold, or like it doesn't fully come with any real manual. Like there are lessons that you will learn in parenting, and hopefully you don't do anything that will, permanently damage them, in a way that will take years and years for it to be fixed. But certainly just being aware, and the understanding that you don't have all the answers. So finding folks that you can trust and rely on. So if it's a parent group, if you don't have a family therapist or a therapist for your child, I think that's also something critically important. I've tried to seek out therapists for my children. Sometimes it works. For one kiddo, she really liked it. And for the other, it's like a negotiation every single time. And so I think giving yourself some grace, if you have the support to be able to maybe send her to a grandparent's house for the weekend, just so you can have some breathing room to regroup and to think about what happened or what do you need to do moving forward. I always think that that's also really, really helpful if you have that type of support. I know not everybody does have that. So sometimes that is the challenge of feeling so overwhelmed with like the day to day, plus trying to be, this amazing parent. But if you don't have that kind of support, doing your best to find, groups or, parent groups or a therapist or someone that you can get extra support. I don't think that as parents, we are meant to just continue to struggle and figure it out, because it's hard. I've held a lot of titles and positions over the years, and I've been in situations that God willing, you would think it would break a person in some cases. But I can tell you what, nothing really compares to parenting in terms of the weight and the gravity of that role. So that has to be your primary focus in one shape or form. And so if you find yourself struggling right now, I do encourage therapy, any kind of support groups. If you know another mom that also has kids in the same age group, maybe trying to form some kind of relationship or partnership there, to saying, listen, if I help you one week, can you help me one week? Because we got to build the community. We got to build the village that we all experienced at one point, whether it was, I wouldn't say it was the perfect village. There was a lot of toxicity in the way that most of us grew up. But one thing I can say is that, my mom had a village to a degree. If she needed to work a second or third shift, we had an aunt that we could go to her house at any given point, and there was never a question about anything. We would come in, my aunt would feed us, and if my mom was working later than expected, she would just send us to bed, and my mom would come for us in the morning. Wasn't the ideal situation, but I know that my mom knew that she could depend on her. And so, I think that's critically important, to be able to find the village, build the village, be a village for someone else. If you're at a space and season in your life where maybe your kids are grown, or maybe you don't have any children, but you know somebody who does, and you see that they're struggling, definitely if you feel called to step in and say, hey, how can I support you? Like, do you want to talk about it? Do you need me to come over? Do you need me to make a meal? Do you need me to pay for a cleaning service? Like, whatever the case may be, I think that it's also imperative that if you know someone that is struggling, or someone that feels like, I feel like they're managing a lot, don't be afraid to step in and be that village for them, because many people do not have the village. They don't have the support. And it can become a lot on one person, and I feel like oftentimes there are a lot of amazing active dads, but there are also a lot of moms that are just so overwhelmed with working and, trying to raise children and still trying to do self-care. So it's like, as a woman, there's so many things that we have to do. And so, don't be afraid to ask for help. Don't be afraid to say what you need, because I do believe that that is critically important. And the one thing I believe that, if you have kids, that right there is one of your biggest jobs, making sure that they have the love, time, and attention that they need. But I do think that this new generation is different, and I am also struggling with that. And I think that that's something that I am intentionally trying to seek support on. And I'm working hard not to take it personal, because I do a lot for my children, and I always wanted them to feel loved and supported. But there becomes a point where even in every intention, good or, that you have for your children, that you have to step back and say, maybe I did too much. Maybe I gave them too much freedom, too much access. And if you find yourself, questioning that, that's okay. I know why you did it. I know why I did it. And now I know that I need to step back and do some things differently if I'm going to be able to get my child back on track. So that's what I would offer in terms of parenting. Certainly, I don't have all the answers, and I'm definitely not a medical expert, just more so speaking from personal experience. It's hard, and there's no manual that comes with these children. We love them. We try to do our best. And at the end of the day, we're still human. So make sure you take care of yourself so that you can be what you need to be for your babies. So, and I think I have time for maybe one more question. So this one says here, I'm interested in starting a business, maybe even possibly a podcast. What advice would you offer me? That's a great question, and it's actually kind of multi-dimensional question. I would say starting any kind of business, whether it's a podcast or any kind of business, just understanding that you're going to have to put in a lot of time, energy, and investment. So I would encourage you to really sit and ask yourself, is that something you're really willing to do? And understanding that the results you may be seeking, you may not see them right away. In building the businesses Maylin and I have been blessed to build, this didn't happen overnight. We've been building a nonprofit organization for over a decade. This podcast, I think, is going on year 2 or 3, I think. 3. And so, just even 3, and I'm still learning every single day about, and I've been blessed. Maylin and I are so blessed. We met our engineer 3 years ago, right on the whim of wanting to do this and not really even knowing how. And, he really kind of stepped in and gave us a blueprint, and has really been amazing to work with. And the reason True Print for Life is still here is because of that. And so understanding that you're going to need people, you're going to need time, you're going to need an investment. So I think it's critically important to sit with your why. Why do you want to start a business? Why do you want to start a podcast? What are you hoping to achieve and attain by starting this business and or podcast? Because it can't just be solely about money. It can't solely be about attention, because these are all things that will not happen right away, and certainly will not be enough to sustain you on days that you're like, I don't want to do it. And I think that it's critically important to really sit with your why for a while, making sure that the business you want to start, what kind of business do you find that it's going to be something that you really are going to be able to spend time, energy, and like I said, investment. You don't have to have a ton of money in some cases, depending, I don't know what kind of business you want to start, or even if you decide you want to start a podcast, but there's investment in everything. And certainly being able to find quality people, because understanding that you are not going to have all the answers to every element of your business. And even if you feel like you have to do multiple roles in the beginning, like we did, I've always been blessed to have a business partner, which I think is also critically important to ask yourself, are you interested in going into business by yourself? Or is this something that you foresee as being a joint venture of some sort, like bringing in someone else? Because I do believe that, the fact that I've had a business partner for so many years has been really helpful to me because I don't have to be and do all things. I can play to my strengths. She plays to her strengths. And the strengths that we don't have, we're able to find leverage through contractors. And that has taken time to really navigate and figure out. There's been bad investments. There have been investments that have been really good and fruitful. And certainly it has taken time. Like none of this has happened overnight. And, right now we are actually in the final stages of putting out a book. So Maylin and I have been working on a book for some years now. And it was something that we had to start and stop, because we are so busy. And so now realizing that, we've been able to finish this book that's really tips and tools on how we started our businesses and the journey along the way, and, offering some additional insight and tools and perspective as to what you can do in this journey. And so I'm really excited, and I'll have more information on the book launch, but it will be this year. I'm going to put that out there, probably spring 2025. And certainly, I encourage you to get our book when it comes available. But in the meantime, I can't stress enough the importance of, really, really asking yourself, because everybody wants to be a boss until you don't get a paycheck, and then or something happens and you don't have anybody you can talk to because nothing. I mean, I tell you what, I've we have built businesses. I have ran for office. I'm still presently an elected official. And when I tell you, I have never felt more alone in certain spaces and seasons, and not alone in a, how do I explain this? It's like, I've never felt alone in a way that like I couldn't just like call my mom or something, for instance, or like I never felt like empty. But I will tell you, there are not a lot of people that really understand the growing pains of what you will have to go through in these spaces. When I decided to run for office, like I don't have anybody in my family that's ever been an elected official. And the way those circles work, like you don't really have, there's not like community in that. Like there's a few select people that people like and gravitate towards, but you're kind of like by yourself. I go to a lot of events by myself. I go to, even when I was running, a lot of things I had to do by myself. And that was a challenging time for me, and it's still on some days. It definitely still is. So understanding that when you're starting new ventures or you're going into different career paths, there are not going to be a lot of people that you initially will have a lot of direct access to be able to encourage you, to be able to provide you tips and tools. Because for me personally, not that I couldn't just call somebody, right? Like I have a lot of people I could call. But for me, if you haven't achieved what I'm looking to achieve or surpass, it can be challenging for you to really understand what it is that I'm going through. And I think that has been a challenge for me, in terms of, building the businesses and, running for office and being in office and navigating, the political sphere, which is very different than the business sphere, a sphere of building a business. So there's all these nuances that, are different. And there's not a lot of people that have had that kind of experience that can say, hey, don't do this, or hey, have you thought about that? And so understanding that you are going to have to build a whole new circle from scratch if you decide. Now, there's nothing wrong with that. I'm not saying that to discourage you. I'm just saying that you have to really sit with your why, and sit with why you want to do this. Why would you put yourself under additional pressure and stress and all the things that come along with this? Because social media makes it everybody feel like having a business is the way. No, you got to make sure you're really ready for that. Like, your finances, your capacity. If you have children, if you have certain things, all of that has to be taken into consideration. Because any move you make, whether it be in business or at your job or in your family, it does have a cause and effect. And so I think that that's something you have to be really, really intentional about. That's one bit of advice that I would really stress in this conversation is understanding any decision you make is going to have a ripple effect in one way or another. And so I would encourage you to spend some time really thinking through what is your capacity. Don't up and quit your job tomorrow, because whatever business it is, it's going to take time to build. And don't let social media trick you into thinking that a 9 to 5 is not it. Like, a 9 to 5 is definitely it. Not to say you can't have both or have it while you're building your dream or your brand. But entrepreneurship is one of the hardest things that I've ever experienced. And I'm gonna say it. I don't know, a lot of people will say it, but it's not for everybody. It takes a certain discipline. It takes a certain trust in yourself. And those are not traits that everybody just naturally possesses. Not to say you can't, just with an understanding that it will have challenges, and there will be days that you don't know how you're going to pay, a certain bill or a certain contractor. And so you have to be willing to bet on yourself in a way that you have never quite fully understood that you would need to. And not saying that you can't do that, but just understanding the pressure and what comes along with that can be a lot. So if you are already feeling overwhelmed, if you're already feeling like you need some additional support, just be kind of mindful of that. If you do decide to start that business, or you do decide to launch that podcast, especially with podcasting, like, you got to record every month. You got to have topics. You have to have guests. You have to have machinery, equipment. There's so many things that comes along with that. It's not just like you pull up a headset and you're just ready to go. Like, I mean, I'm sure some people, like, that is it. Like, if you have like the money to invest in a team and, that's being all figured out for you and you just need to pull up, great. But if you are kind of starting from scratch, like, understanding there's a lot you're going to need to learn. But it is fun. I will say that. So I know I gave you all the like hard things to think about in the beginning, but I will say that there is a lot of pride. There is a lot of joy. I always am so grateful when I get, messages from people who have heard one of our episodes and have said to us, like, wow, like, I really needed this, or thank you so much, or like, this hit home for me. And like, they'll text us. Like, if they know us, they will send us like text messages, or we'll get DMs on social media. And so that's part of the why. That's why we decided to do this. And even with the work that we do in our other businesses, I know we are helping people. I know we are impacting lives. I know we're changing the narrative. And so for me, in days that it's really, really hard, that keeps me fueled. That keeps me moving forward. And so that's how I know what I'm doing right now matters. And it's what God's plan was for my life. And so certainly that's what I just would encourage you to think about, your why. And certainly if you're ready to rock and roll, then rock and roll. There are a lot of resources. The Small Business Development Center, most states have them. They have free business classes and consultations. So I would encourage you to look at the Small Business Development Center. And certainly as a starting point, and finding any kind of networking groups or, YP or affinity groups that you can be a part of to start building your network and start getting that development that you're going to need. Because building a business is more than just a product or an idea. There's accounting, there's finances, there's insurance, there's personnel, there's contracts. The list, there's taxes, there's so many additional elements. So if that's not your strong suit, certainly you want to try to align yourself with someone that can help guide you, because in entrepreneurship, every step can and will have a financial implication. So certainly you'll make mistakes, and certainly there will be challenges along the way, but understanding that it is an investment. It's an investment of your time, your energy, and equally important, your money. So with that being said, I hope that was helpful. As the book, when the book launches, certainly we will let you all know, and we hope that the book will provide some additional insight and perspective as to what is starting a business, and what does that journey look like, and what has that looked like for Maylin and I throughout the many years we've been working together, which is, I want to say, about 15 years. Maylin and I have been working together in various ways. And so, yeah, it's definitely a journey. So I think I don't know if I have time for another question, or are we Okay, so that is it for today. Thank you all so much for tuning in. And this was fun. I have not yet filmed an episode by myself yet. So I hope that was impactful for you and I wasn't all over the place. But thank you for submitting your questions. And certainly thank you for listening. Like, we are so grateful. We never take any of you for granted. And so certainly if something resonated with you today, feel free to like this episode, share it with a friend, comment in the comment section. And until we meet again, remember, it's bigger than you.
Thank you so much for listening today. We're excited and we hope that you follow us on
Instagram, True Print for Life, YouTube channel, also True Print for Life. And make sure that you share, like, watch our videos. Make sure that you follow us on all streaming platforms.